I claim it is worth your time and effort to write special code to test stuff, even though you're going to throw that code away. This is a really hard concept to get through to students. This is what's called a unit test. A unit test is when you write code, and this is crap code that's not part of your real program, but it's just code there to satisfy yourself that this actually works. I'm just going to do it, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to come back here to my game. I have this main class. Before my game even starts, I'm going to say tube t equals new tube, and I'll save it at location, or I'll start it at 2377. There. So that'll make a tube at that spot, right? Now I'm going to say JSON j equals t dot Marshall. See, that will call this Marshall function, which will return a JSON object to me. And once I've got that, what should I do with it? What can you do with a JSON object? Well, here I am in the JSON file. We could look through the whole file. The thing you're going to need is this one, save. I'm going to try j.save, and what should I call it? How about testtube.json? Sound good? And in fact, I don't really even need my whole game, right? I could just have that be the whole darn program for now. Or I could let it run the game. I don't really care. I could move this into a separate function and call it test my tube marshaller. Let's do that. Static void test my tube marshaller. Just because now, anytime I want to test that, I can come back here and call that function. And if I'm satisfied that it's working, well, then I'll just comment that out and run my game as usual. But for right now, I'm not satisfied. I'm going to run my test code. Let's go do it. Build. It built. Game. Now my game is running. Still works. Still can save. Close it. But there's this thing called testtube.json that I just made. Let's look at that. There it is, right there. Let's open that in a text editor. Behold, testtube.json file. Yay, I serialized the tube. Now, I haven't really described JSON to you very well. But braces mean on object, and then name value pairs are used for fields in an object, and they're comma separated. And basically, that's what I put in my JSON object, and that's what this code produced. It produced a bunch of objects, and those objects produced that text, wherever it went. There, that one. Do you get what we're doing here, what the general idea is? Okay, fabulous. Then, let's go give you a feel for JSON. There happens to be this nice website called json.org. I don't know who runs this or why, but it describes JSON very beautifully and very simply in a nice picture form. And it looks kind of funny, but this is really the best explanation of JSON I've ever found. Here's what an object looks like in JSON. Start at the left here, pretend you're a little car and you're driving along this road, and first you run into a brace. Therefore, if you're making an object, all objects start with a brace. Does that make sense? Well, then we hit a fork in the road. We can go up or we can go straight. Those are your choices. Let's suppose we go straight. Well, then an object has a string followed by a colon followed by a value, and then we can either have a comma and do it again, or we can terminate our object and hit a brace. Well, in fact, do you see that that's kind of what our thing here is? It's a brace followed by some name value pairs, followed by comma, followed by name value pairs, followed by a brace. And so that picture describes an object. But you might ask, what is a string? See how it says string? So let's go down here and look at a string. A string starts with a quotation mark, followed by, and usually you spend time in this loop right here, bunch of characters followed by a closing quotation mark, and then you're ended. Or you can come down here and do some of these special characters, because you have to be able to escape quotation marks since they're bounded in quotation marks, right? So slash quotation mark doesn't terminate it, but a quotation mark not preceded by a slash does. Do you get how that is saying that? Okay. Well, number's my favorite one because that's a crazy road. But if you drive down that road, you'll see that everything you can form with that is a number. Because numbers either start with a minus sign or they don't, followed by a decimal period and a bunch of digits, and then you can have an exponent at the end and kind of get it? Okay. Well, if you ever wonder what can you do with JSON, there's really only two major things. There's objects and arrays. Objects are bounded by braces. Objects are bounded by braces. Arrays are bounded by brackets, the squarish ones. And arrays just have a bunch of values separated by commas. Objects have a bunch of names and values separated by commas. And I don't really know what else to say about JSON. You kind of just have to see a lot of it, and then it starts to make sense. And, well, there's your first example. This is what a tube looks like in JSON format. Any questions? Okay. Well, we now know that we can load and save tubes. No, we can't. We can save tubes. We can't load them yet. Well, I don't need that test code anymore, so I'll just comment it out. Notice that this code's still there. So later on, if a horrendous bug occurs in my code and I think to myself, oh no, where's the bug? Well, I just come down here to my unit tests and I run this test again, and I can convince myself, oh good, that part's still stable. And then I go try another part. Oh good, that part's still stable. Do you see how that helps you narrow down the bug really fast? If every part of your code has its own unit tests, you can hunt down bugs really, really fast. So write unit code tests. It's worth it. Yes, it means you're doing more work than is in the assignment. But truthfully, you'll be doing much less work than everybody else. So unit tests, unit tests, unit tests. Okay. Now our tube knows how to save itself. Let's make our model save itself. It'll be kind of like that one. So let's come down to our model. Model will have a marshalling capability. We'll start by making a new object for the model. And now let's go see what models have in them. Nothing but tubes. Now, if you are the type of person who has a whole bunch of member variables that don't belong in your objects, you're going to start to realize this task is kind of difficult because your model doesn't just have tubes, it has 50 things that shouldn't be there. And then, you got to sort it out, right? All I have are tubes, so it's going to be easy for me. So I have an object. Let's add I need to go look at my example because I don't remember how to use this. And that's good because you don't either. How do I do an array? Ammo is an array here, I think. Yeah, see I have I have an array list of torpedoes called ammo. Perfect example for an array list of tubes, isn't it? Okay, so here's what I'm doing. In fact, I'll just copy it and paste it. There's the part related to ammo. So I'll come up here to my model. We don't have that X or Y business, so I'll get rid of that. And I hate spaces, I like tabs, so I'm going to tabify this region. By the way, spaces or tabs, which is the true programming style? I like tabs because one hit and you're all the way over there. Spaces, you have to sit there hitting it 4 times. The space believers think spaces are better because it looks the same on every editor no matter how many spaces your tabs are set to. But in my opinion, that's my decision, not your decision. So that's why I like tabs. There are holy wars over this. There's no real right answer. The space people have good points too. And there are some things you can't do with tabs, you can do with spaces, and we could argue about it till the end of time. The answer is do what you like. Here's the real thing. Don't get worked up when people use spaces because there are plenty of pretty printers. That's a program that formats your code for you. So just run a pretty printer, and then it turns it into the form you like, and then you don't have to make a big deal and be that guy that gets all grumpy at people for using spaces instead of tabs. Okay. But since you are my students, the correct answer is tabs. All right, there you go. There's nothing called ammo. Let's call it tubes. That makes more sense. And it obviously won't be temp list. Oh, I think I missed a line. Yeah, we need to make a JSON object to hold the whole list of stuff. So, I'm lost. Where am I? There we go. I'll call it tube list. I don't want this to be named tubes because then that would be the same as this thing, which is called tubes. So I need another name. For now, I'll call this, how about I'll call it JSON tube. That makes sense to me. So JSON tubes is now the list of tubes in JSON form. And then I'll add the JSON tubes to the object that's representing my whole model. I could call that JSON model. Would that be more clear to you? I'll just leave it as ob because I'm lazy. So I've added the JSON tubes to my object, my JSON object that represents the whole model. And now I need to visit all the tubes. And for each one, I need to marshal it. How about tubes.getI.marshal? Let's look at this code one little piece at a time and see what we're doing. I make a variable of type JSON. What is a JSON? It's a little thing that produces symbols that look like this stuff. This is one JSON object, this is another JSON object, this is another one. Okay. Here I allocate a new JSON object on the heap and I make my variable reference it. Now I'm making a second JSON object because this one represents my model and this one represents the tubes which are inside of the model. Okay. I'm going to add this tubes object to my model object and I'm going to call it tubes. You with me? And I'm going to run through all of the tubes in my model, turn each one into a JSON tubes object and add it to my JSON tubes list. And now I've got an ob, which is this JSON object that references a tubes object, which references an object for all of my tubes. And now I could turn this whole thing into a JSON file, right? You with me? Okay. I've written a lot of code. We better test it. Let's go back here and say static void test the model marshaller. So I'll say model m equals new model, JSON j equals m dot marshal. So I'm going to turn my marshal or my model into a bunch of JSON objects or a tree of JSON objects, and I'll say j.save as test model.json. How about that? And I'll call this unit test. Build it. Java game, run it. Here's my game. It still works. I can press S. Yay. Close it. List. Now I have this test model.json. And there's my whole model in text format. Because a model is an object. A model has a member variable named tubes, and tubes is an array of nothing. Because there are no tubes in my model. Did it work? I think that worked. The only thing is I'm not seeing any tubes in there. Would it be nice if we saw some tubes there? I can come back to my test and let's do that. M dot, how do I add tubes? Tubes. Okay, I can do it like this. M dot tubes dot add new tube. 3117. M dot tubes dot add new tube. 1, 2. M dot tubes dot add new tube. 100, 200. Now I've got a model with 3 tubes in it, and I'm going to save that. Let's see if that works. Okay. Build. Run. There's my game. Close it. Test model.json. Yes, I know. Reload it. And now here's what it looks like. And you look at that and you say, "Gah, that's a big, complicated, hairy mess." So in past iterations of this class, I'd have students design their own serialization formats. And they designed very, very bad, ugly ones. And I finally decided I couldn't take it anymore. That's why I'm making you all use JSON. JSON is a clean serialization format. You can code anything in it, and it works. Yeah, this looks kind of messy, but let's see if we can understand it. That's an object. What is this object? That's your whole model. Meaning from this brace to that brace represents the whole model. Tubes is a member variable of it, which has a list in it. What's this list? That's tubes, dir. Okay, and inside of that is a list of a bunch of objects. And you see how each object is separated by a comma? There's the commas. Well, each object has an open and closing brace. And inside of that, there's a name value pair for the X and Y position. Basically, this is a model with tubes in it, and inside of that are tubes, and each tube has an X and a Y position. Well, then you get JSON. Okay. Let's hook it all up now. Okay. What happened to my text editor? I closed it. Why do I do that? Okay. We're done with our testing. Now let's go make the thing work. So I'm going to come down to my controller. Instead of printing, "Yay, it worked," I'm going to instead say something like model dot, do I have a model here? Hey, I do. Good. Dot Marshall. So that will return a JSON object, right? Dot save model.json. How about that?